Remember when Bioware used to make good RPGs? Well, let's talk about that. So Dragon Age Origins is a classic Bioware RPG where you play as a hero who leads a merry band of oddballs on an epic quest to defeat this thing called an archdemon, who controls an army of darkspawn, which are basically orcs who like to celebrate finding one of their long buried masters by trying to wipe out all civilization above ground. As you can probably guess, the game leans in hard on the fantasy setting, with the typical cliches such as dwarves who like to drink a lot and elves who like to sound fancy with hard to pronounce words.
Masirinus Mithra, you may return to your post.
Manuvinen.
The storytelling and unique characters stop it from being too generic. Even though they're using basically the oldest type of fantasy storytelling there is out there, which is like a chosen hero trying to destroy a Dark Lord, they put things together in interesting ways, such as the only way you can defeat this archdemon is to join an order of warriors known as the Grey Wardens, who in the marketing for the game look like a badass group you want to join, but let's say there are some costs to joining, which I'll chat about later. But first I should probably chat about how the game runs. It runs okay, but it did crash quite a bit for me as I was playing through it, which for a 60 plus hour RPG is a bit of a bummer. But if you can get past that, you're gonna have some fun. The game's visuals are from what I like to call the brown age of gaming. For some reason a lot of games from this period really like to use brown a lot. This trend seemed to start with Resident Evil 4 and infected a bunch of games for around about half a decade. Games like Resistance Fall of Man, Grand Theft Auto 4, Dead Space, Fallout 3 all used overwhelming amounts of brown. I guess being a colourful game in that period was uncool or something? Or maybe developers were imitating another game's aesthetics without actually understanding why they were chosen in the first place. I mean, it's not like games publishers and developers like to copy trends without actually understanding how things work, right? Right? Apart from the lack of colour, overall the visuals does the job of placing you in a fantasy setting. Though, zooming in on a character from an isometric view to a third-person angle will show the game's lack of detail. I got the sense that this is a compromise between having both a third-person view and an isometric view in the same game, as the game does look a lot better from a distance. Okay, I'll stop ragging on the game a bit now. It does get the general feeling of a fantasy setting. Ridiculously tall towers in the middle of nowhere? Check. Grimy human cities and villages? Check. Forests with pointy-eared creatures in them? Check. You're probably getting the sense that this is all pretty generic fantasy stuff at this point. Which is true mostly, but Bioware did add something special, something unique to its generic fantasy game, which even some of the biggest developers find hard to achieve even in this day and age. What is this amazing super secret sauce that Bioware used to have? Good storytelling. Great storytelling is what makes Dragon Age Origins stand out from other games. The gameplay is actually okay at best and probably done better in other isometric RPGs. But once you get into the story, it grabs you and drags you deeper into it. Okay, for example, there's this Order of Templar Knights, whose job it is to hunt supposedly bad rogue mages. Sounds a bit heroic, right? But these knights need to drink this stuff called lyrium to use abilities to fight these rogue mages. Oh, and this lyrium stuff, it's addictive. And over long periods of use can cause memory loss. You know, the usual fine print kind of stuff.
He doesn't forget who he is, even if he can't remember anything else.
Always look on the bright side of life.
As you'll travel across the game, you'll come across these knights. Some will be willing to buy the stuff illegally from you, which makes the story way more interesting than good knight stops big bad mages. Oh, and I didn't even mention that these rogue mages go rogue for a pretty good reason too. You see, there's a slight chance if you use magic in this world, you get possessed by a demon. So if you want to be a socially acceptable mage, you kind of have to get locked up for life. Also, you have to be under constant guard by these Templar Knights who are trained to kill you the moment you seem a bit demonish. Which sounds like a lovely way to live. These are some of the little mini twists in the fantasy setting that keep you interested in the world and make you want to find out more. Which you can if you're a bit of a lore nerd like me, because this game has a ton of codex entries. Maybe too many. But the best way to find out the game's world is through the companions. These companions make the game go from an average fantasy story to a great one. The most iconic character being Morrigan, Witch of the Wilds, who has a mix of sharp wit and very blunt sarcasm.
Yes, very lovely. Let us soak in the vista before the massacre begins.
Which plays off an almost equally iconic companion, Alistair. In any other fantasy story, probably would be the protagonist, and is instead a bit of a goofball that uses sarcasm to avoid responsibility. Maybe too much at times.
I guess I was sort of hoping that would go away.
The truth does not go away.
Didn't say it was a good plan.
In the general scheme of things, he's basically your senior in the Grey Wardens, but he lets you take the lead because he's not great at taking charge.
Of the two of you that remain, are you not the senior Grey Warden here? I find it curious that you allow another to lead while you follow.
You find that curious, do you?
Also, he's a former Templar. You know, this world's order of mage hunters. So seeing both Morrigan and Alistair argue with each other is always fun to watch.
And besides, isn't your mother a scary witch who lives in the middle of a forest? Much more interesting.
To you, perhaps. You would find the moss growing upon a stone interesting.
You know what's more interesting than that? Apostates, mages outside of the tower. That's illegal, you know.
You did not read that in a book somewhere, did you? I hope the small letters did not strain you overmuch.
Some other cool companions include Liliana, a nun who was once a bard/assassin. She likes shoes a lot and can be scary at times.
Dying while in the company of a lovely seductress. Tell me that isn't a good death.
I don't know if I should take you seriously. But you scare me sometimes.
The rest of the companions are okay, but those are the ones that really stood out to me. Like with most Bioware games, you do companion-specific quests, and you find out more about them and gain approval while doing those quests. This approval system was designed to show companions opening up to you and trusting you, more or less depending on how your actions play out in the story. But it had one major flaw, which was gifts, which you can give to companion and they'll like you more without all that getting to know them, relationship, work stuff, you know, like an actual person would do. Gifts pretty much break the approval system because you can literally buy someone into liking you regardless how you act in the game. So that's a little broken and maybe not a good life lesson on how to make friends, eh? It also breaks the character progression of all these individual companions because as you play the game, you're supposed to slowly unravel the backstory and find out more about them and what you like and what you don't like while going on all these adventures together and get that good story progression going. But that's not here when you give gifts. So if you do play this game, be careful with the amount of gifts you give. Give story specific ones obviously for each character, but don't go too crazy with it. Try to resist that instant gratification. I know it's hard, but you can do it. I believe in you. Okay, so I've chatted about story and characters. Let's get into the gameplay. So Dragon Age Origins gameplay is based on old school pause and play isometric games. Basically, you stop time to pick a skill to use and then resume time to see it play out in real time. What makes Dragon Age a little different is you can play it in third person or the isometric view. Okay, on a little tangent. The first time I played Dragon Age was on a PS3 and you could only play it in the third person view. Also, the game was a lot easier on consoles compared to PC. Now that I've played both, I can definitely tell the difference. Because the only times I paused on the PS3 was during boss battles and maybe the occasional hard fight, whereas on PC it was like nearly all the time. Playing on console felt more like an action game, though really it wasn't. Though it felt like it could be one if the inputs were a bit faster and the animations weren't so delayed. One thing that made it feel more actiony was these cool finisher animations that played out on enemies sometimes, which made you wish the game was a bit more like that. But on PC it felt more like a top-down tactical game with an additional third-person view where you could zoom in, sometimes to get a closer look at those cool animations. This is one of the problems Bioware had to deal with in the sequels, apart from the ridiculous development times and bad management. Because trying to make these two different perceived styles of gameplay work in one game is really hard. And they kinda did it by accident in Dragon Age Origins, even though it's basically the same game on console as it is on PC. The tweaking of difficulty and viewpoint on console seems like a minor difference, but it gave the game a very different feel compared to PC. So now Bioware have to satisfy both these very different tastes in gameplay going forward, and if you lean in one direction too much, someone's not going to be happy. Which has basically been the Dragon Age fanbase ever since. Okay, tangent done, back to the review. The number of skills and build choices are good, but it is a bit simpler than a traditional isometric RPG. But I wouldn't say it's dumbed down either. It toes that line just in between making things simpler but not too simple, unlike some other games. So apart from combat, you're going to do a lot of chatting. To party members, to different townspeople, and other oddballs that you find out in the world. These conversations aren't just for show, you're going to make some pivotal decisions as you go through. The amount of influence you have in the story is pretty great. You really get the feeling of someone making an impact on the world. It's probably Dragon Age Origins' greatest strength, as just the first few choices in the game, which are your origins, have a really big impact in the game. So now I need to chat about the story. so spoilers ahead. If you want to skip that, then go to here. You can start the game with one of 6 different origin stories, all of which have an influence in shaping how the story goes. Just as an example, if you play as a human noble, you'll get a nice start to the game.
Good evening, my lord.
You'll be part of a pleasant noble family who you'll get to know a bit while exploring the family castle. But best of all, you'll get a dog, and you'll get to name him. Best start to a game ever. It's all great until your family gets murdered by a rival noble. That's a bit of a downer. On a tangent, this rival noble is voice acted by Tim Curry. Talking about voice acting in the game, there's quite a few good performances, and it's by people I don't usually expect to be in these type of games. Well, some are, but there's 1 or 2 surprises. In my most recent playthrough there was this really good surprise, which I only realized after a double take.
Dwarven crafts. Fine dwarven crafts. Direct from Orzammar. You won't find better.
Okay, back to the story. So after the family massacre, you get recruited by the Grey Wardens, who try to petition the king to help with your family problems. During your adventures, you'll have reminders like this about your origins that link in with the main quest. Again, this is all great storytelling that Bioware used to be good at. It's what I'd like to call the Bioware magic.
You can't call it that.
Huh? I can't say that. Why?
Because that term is already used to describe something else.
Oh, that term is used to describe what?
Crunch culture at Bioware.
Oh, okay. Pretend I didn't say that. Since we're talking about bad leadership, let's talk about Loghain. So at a crucial battle against the Darkspawn where Loghain is in charge of a large portion of the king's army, there's a point where Loghain needs to send in the troops to save the king fighting this huge horde, which is threatening to destroy the entire kingdom. In this moment he decides, nah, let's not help. Oh, and maybe let's start a civil war so I can claim power for myself. When you see this happen, your immediate reaction is, wow, what an asshole. But not only does he not help, he blames this loss on the Grey Wardens, which basically labels you a criminal for a large portion of the game, since you are part of the Grey Wardens. So good luck with random assassination attempts and his regular troops trying to kill you while you travel. Though as the game goes on, you find out why he did what he did, which some people might find a compelling reason, such as the king being a weak ruler who was inviting an old enemy into the kingdom to help fight the Darkspawn.
Marek and I drove those bastards out, not roll out the welcome for them now.
We need help, Father. We cannot deal with this crisis alone.
Ferelden will stand on its own.
Loghain has a semi-reasonable case for what he's doing, though the methods he uses are quite questionable.
There is talk that your illness left you feeble, Eamon. Some worry that you may no longer be fit to advise Ferelden.
Illness? Why not call your poison by its true name? Not everyone at the Landsmeet will cast aside their loyalties as easily as you and these sycophants.
So you need to defeat Loghain's forces. Oh, and there's that world-ending event with the Darkspawn happening in the background too. Lucky for you, you're now a member of the Grey Wardens, which has perks like initiation rituals in which you have to drink potions with Darkspawn blood in it. This initiation potion has a high chance of killing you, but the perks include having terrible fever dreams that will be with you for the rest of your life. Oh, and you can sense nearby Darkspawn. Anyway, now that you're a Grey Warden, you can use these old treaties, which basically gives you a way to recruit all the various factions in Ferelden to fight for your cause. There is a catch though. All of them have their own problems, and guess who's going to help solve them? Yeah, it's you. Oh boy, do they have problems. The Circle Magi has a serious outbreak of demonitis. The dwarves basically have a slightly less violent version of the US elections happening, while the elves have werewolves taking over their forest like a furry convention gone wild. Oh, and the last big one is this noble lord who's the most likely to help you is in a half-dead coma from poisoning, while being in a castle overrun by the undead, which was unleashed by his demon-possessed son. Now in your average fantasy story, any one of these would probably be a pretty good setup for an epic fantasy tale, but Dragon Age Origins does all of them, and it does them pretty well too. There are choices in all these quests that can make a difference to the end of the game in what feels like a meaningful way, such as the allies you'll have to fight the Darkspawn in the obligatory epic last battle. This is all great stuff because it makes you feel like you had an impact on the world. While Dragon Age Origins is an older game with maybe not the most amazing gameplay, it does one thing really well, which is take you on a great story and let you decide how you want to go through it. It's something I wish more modern games would do, but at least we still have these admittedly old but reliable games to go back to when we want those kinds of experiences. Though I would not say no to a remake. Hint hint, Bioware, if you're watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then like and subscribe. Also, I'd like to know your opinions about the game, if you have any, so let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Trap right ahead.